The next thing I want to look at is really quite pivotal to SQL injection, but also pivotal to other risks such as XSS as well. And it simply comes down to validating untrusted data. So earlier on in the course, we looked at the underlying code, and in particular, the fact that down here on line 16, we're building up this SQL statement, which then gets executed. But the problem here is that when we pass in this cylinders parameter, so this is the one that comes from the query string, we're never doing any sort of validation on it. So what do I mean by validation? Well, let me give you an example. One way would be to use the code I've got on my clipboard here. I'm just going to paste that in. And this is a whitelist of allowable values. So what it's saying is that our allowable cylinders can be V6, V8, and so on and so forth. And if we don't see one of those values in that cylinders parameter, we're going to get line 20. So it's going to throw an exception, invalid cylinder value provided. I'm just going to recompile this solution, and then we'll jump back into the browser and we'll see how the app behaves now. So the first thing is we'll make sure the page still loads okay, which it will because V12 is one of our whitelisted items. But if we were to make a change, even such as adding a single quote to the parameter, let's see what happens. Okay, invalid cylinder value provided. Now, per the last clip, you never want to actually show this underlying exception, and inevitably you'd handle this more gracefully, but you can see the point. Now, you do have to be a little bit careful with whitelists, because it also means that something like this won't work. What if we had a V5 engine? It's a valid engine layout, but we have an exception, invalid cylinder value provided again. So you've got to be a little bit careful with being explicit. There are cases where it works well, where you only ever have a known set of values, but it doesn't work as well when you need to look for patterns. So let's jump back into Visual Studio and I'll show you what a pattern might look like. Okay, let's replace the code I had here just before, the whitelist, and instead I'm going to use a regular expression. And this regular expression says that the cylinder pattern must start with a V and then contain digits 0 through 9, and it can have either 1 or 2 digits, and that's it. The string must then be terminated. And if we don't have that, then we're going to get this exception again, invalid cylinder value provided. So let's recompile that and jump back over to the browser again. So here's my test from just before, the V5. Now that didn't pass because V5 wasn't in the whitelist. It should be okay now though. Let's try and reload this and we'll see what we get. Okay, so the page now loads. There are no V5s, which is fine, but the pattern was okay. However, the pattern wouldn't be okay if I did something like this, if I used a lowercase v, because my regular expression was expecting an uppercase. It would also fail if I started having engine layouts like a flat 6. And the reason I'm mentioning this now is that you do have to have a balance in here. You have to try and find the right fit between securing the system and being very explicit about what you will allow versus having a negative impact on usability. Earlier on in the course, I mentioned the number of times websites have blocked single quotes from names, and then anyone who's an O'Reilly or an O'Brien or any other perfectly valid surname gets rejected from the system. That might be secure, but it's no good if a bunch of people can't register anymore. Now finally, both of those patterns I just showed you talked about what we would allow, not what we would disallow. The difference, of course, being the first one is a whitelist and the second one is a blacklist. We always want a whitelist. Be explicit about what we know to be good. Be very, very cautious with blacklisting because you simply don't always know what will be bad. You can make assumptions about it, but new attack vectors are discovered and new exploits may use different characters that aren't on the blacklist. So focus on just restricting these input validations to what is known to be good.